Hello, my name is Andrea Valencia, and today I'll be talking about compulsory education. It is believed that the most effectual means of preventing tyranny would be to illuminate, as far as practicable, the minds of people at large and more equally to give them the knowledge of those facts, which history exhibit that they may be enabled to know. These were the words of Thomas Jefferson in Bill 79, for the more general diffusion of knowledge. The bill was presented in the House of Delegates in 1778, but unfortunately, it was not passed. Much later, there was a much revised version, which was finally passed into law in 1796 as an act to establish public schools. Jefferson saw the need to have an educated population in order to exercise the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Compulsory education attendance refers to the minimum and maximum age required by each state in which a student must be enrolled in and attending public school or some equivalent education program defined by the law. However, this differs from state to state. For example, according to the National Centers for Education Statistics, Alabama, Connecticut, and Missouri let the parent or legal guardian of a 6-year-old to opt out of enrolling their child by notifying the local board of education that the child will not be in school when he or she is 7 years old. At that age, children who attend school are already reading books by themselves and have been introduced to basic arithmetic equations. Another interesting data is from Arizona, Wyoming, and Vermont, in which they only require students to attend school until they are 16 or they complete the 10th grade. These students will be considered dropout students when they look for a job, or they will not be able to apply to college. The Education Commission of States explains that nearly half of all states allow children ranging from the ages 14 to 18 to be exempt from the compulsory attendance requirement if they meet one or more of the following stipulations, which are being employed, having passed the 8th grade, or having their parents' permission. Let us start with some background history. In ancient Judea, even before Plato's The Republic, popularized by the idea of mandatory education, Jewish leaders required parents to provide at least an informal education for their children. With the Reformation, though, beginning in 1524, Martin Luther called for mandatory schooling because he wanted to ensure that Christians would be able to read the Bible independently. As the Reformation spread throughout Europe, so did the enactment of mandatory education laws. The concept of compulsory school attendance would gradually spread to other parts of the world. In the United States, even as early as the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, the federal government set aside resources for education. Massachusetts became the first U.S. state to enact a compulsory education law in 1852, having already passed a similar law in 1647 when it was still a British colony. The 1852 law required every city and town to offer primary school, focusing on grammar and basic arithmetic. Parents who refused to send their children to school were fined, and in some cases stripped of their parental rights, and their children apprenticed to others. The creation of the Federal Department of Education of 1867, while not a cabinet-level position yet, did enforce the importance of education. In the first report of 1870, the commissioner proudly reported that nearly 7 million children were enrolled in the elementary schools, and 80,000 were enrolled in secondary schools. On the other hand, 20% of the entire adult population was illiterate in that year, and 80% of the Black population was illiterate as well. Before Massachusetts and other states, without such laws, education was typically provided by private schools run by churches. Since they charged tuitions, poorer children were excluded and instead received informal schooling at home, mostly by their mom. That would change during the immigration boom between the 19th and 20th centuries because education was seen as the best way to assimilate immigrant children to America. During that time, numerous states enacted compulsory education laws designed to take education out of the hands of patriarchal schools and primarily into the purview of state-run public schools. These actions were taken in a growing response to the fear of immigrant values and the Catholic Church itself. The Supreme Court later overturned these so-called compulsory education laws that required students to attend public schools only. In 1940, more than half of the U.S. population had completed no more than an 8th grade education. However, by the 1940s and 1950s, more than half of young adults had completed high school. The gap in illiteracy between white and black adults continued to be narrowed through the 20th century, but by 1979, the rates were about the same. Compulsory schooling increases and improves the level of education of those most likely to leave school early. If this is a large cohort and there is a substantial compliance, it will also raise average schooling levels in the population. The economic returns, in terms of earnings, to the schooling can be sizable, which may also have intergenerational returns. According to the U.S. Bureau, in 2019, the median income for a person who did not attend high school was $30,000, compared to the income of $50,000 for a high school graduate. Previous to the compulsory education, most families may have relied on children to leave education in order to help obtain basic necessities for their family. This behavior undoubtedly denied the children to their right to education. And in 1880, 1 in 4 children between the ages of 10 and 15 worked in the U.S. For example, Alabama temporarily repealed its compulsory education laws in response to the pressure from a large textile company. Mississippi was the last state to pass laws requiring school attendance in 1917. Enforcement of the state laws was largely ineffective until states realized the value of an educated workforce. Other social benefits, such as crime reduction, improvements in financial literacy, and improvements in mental cognition in older age, may also be quite substantial. Research based on the Survey of Health, Aging and Retirement in the Europe database examined the impact of compulsory education on depression and cognition. They found out that the additional schooling actually reduces the probability of suffering from depression by 6.5% points, with also a significant impact on cognition. Education prepares a child intellectually for a mature adult life. Compulsory education prepares the child for an active adult living in a free society and fosters respect for his or her cultural identity, language, and values. Education provides a daily routine, responsibility, and activities contributing to the healthy, well-rounded development.